Good evening, everyone. It is 5:30 on October 7th, 2024. I'm calling to order the Middleton School Committee meeting. As a reminder, this meeting is recorded. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I'm not seeing any remarks from the public, so we'll move on to approval of the previous meeting minutes.
Those are on the drive from the 9/9 meeting.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from September 9th?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
All right, I will second it. Any questions, discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes from September 9th, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. Do we have reports from other committees? Jackie, do you have anything?
I can give just an update for the CPAC. Then we have our next meeting will be October 16th. And as for right now, I believe that's going to be an evening meeting at 7 o'clock at the Masco Middle Library. We're also looking to hold a workshop during the month of October, probably towards the end of the month, for people to keep an eye out for on it's on the topic is bullying, and it's through the Federation for Children with Special Needs. They host a workshop, so we're looking to bring that. That's all for now.
Okay. Anything else from any other committees? No? Okay. All right. Moving on to reports from the superintendent.
Thanks, Michelle. Good to see everybody. I hope you had a good weekend and a good Monday. A couple of updates, and there are some documents in the drive just to support some of these updates. The first one is the NERAC Safety Conference. NERAC is the Northeast Homeland Security Regional Advisory Council. I have the good fortune of being one of two superintendents in the Northeast region. It's about 85 communities that represents our public schools on this group. This is a group comprised of public safety personnel, fire and police from across those communities, public health as well, along with other members of state-level offices as they relate to emergency preparedness, MEMA, and things like that. So we were planning and were able to execute on a school safety seminar. This was just past October 3rd, just last week. It was a half-day session. We were able to bring in a number of different resources for folks in the Northeast region. We had Todd McGee, who does a lot on de-escalation and early intervention when you're navigating a crisis situation. Jamie Barrett from the Cambridge Police Department, threat assessment and risk mitigation. FBI agent, Special Agent Brian LeBlanc was there talking about swatting and internet-based threats. Valerie Haven, disability inclusion and emergency preparedness. And Assistant District Attorney Kate McDougall was also present talking about human trafficking and some of the things that they're seeing in the region as it relates to that as well. We then had a panel with all the attendees. We were able to ask questions of all of them. And I think the session was very well received. We had about 150 people or so across the region. Obviously, this is a topic that's top of mind for all of us. And again, I feel fortunate, as I know Steve Zreich does, the superintendent in Salem, that he and I both sit on that committee and just have access to people and resources to help us navigate some of the questions that we always continue to have as they relate to school safety. So overall, a very good session for sure, and I'll keep you updated as we continue to work on that committee. I sit on a subcommittee of that group as well of NERAC. It's called the Interoperability Committee, and that has to do with all communications as it relates to police and fire and schools. And so both of those groups meet monthly. And as I continue to learn things, I will certainly bring them back to our district and to our committees as well. Connected to that is Be Safe. If you look in the drive, there should be a little one-pager on Be Safe. And Be Safe is an organization that we work with, and what they do is they do interactive digital mapping of our schools. So this is an organization we have partnered with for a long time now, and we are re-upping our information and work with them. One of the key things in the public safety world is that every building has an A, B, C, and D side. When public safety approaches a building, if they're approaching the A side of the building, that's typically the front of the building. And then you go clockwise around the building, B, C, and then D. And we've been talking a lot around, like, at least I've been mentioning to public safety, and we've been talking about in our safety meetings, our doors should be labeled that way. If it's door 3 and it's on the A side of the building, it should be labeled A3. And if it's door 7 and it's on the B side of the building, it should be B7. And then that way, in an emergency situation, if you're saying to 911, I'm at B7, we've eliminated 75% of the building for them to come to, right? That we've sort of narrowed down their ability, because they might not know exactly where door 7 is, like we would know where door 7 is. And so the other thing that we've been talking about is also labeling the interior of our exterior doors. And the reason for that is in an emergency or an anxious, anxiety-provoking situation, you actually lose IQ points. And if you've ever lost your phone or your keys, you know that, because you can't find them and you start to, where did I leave my phone or my keys? You actually drop a few IQ points in that moment. In a crisis situation, it's the same thing. And so we've been talking about, if we're going to label the outside of the door A3, well, we should label the inside of the door A3. So if someone says, what door are you near, you just can look up and say, I'm near door A3, as opposed to, I don't know what door I'm near. It's the front door near the playground. Like, that's very vague. And so what Be Safe does is they create these interactive digital floor plans. They're all housed in an online application that we share with public safety, and allows everybody to have, in our school realm and in our public safety realm, access to what the door numbers are and where the room numbers are, and so on and so forth. So we're working on this again. Last time we did an update with them was several years ago, and we've added some cameras in the buildings, and we want to identify where the camera locations are and things along those lines. So just two sort of safety related items, as it's something that's certainly always top of mind in the drills that we do at our schools as well. Two final things. One is DLAC. That stands for Digital Learning Advisory Council. This is another state-wide board that I have the good fortune of sitting on, with members from across the state. And this board was originally formed many years ago to look at virtual education and some of the digital learning academies that we have in the state. So you might have heard of TECH, which is an online public virtual school that kids can go to if sort of regular public school doesn't work. These are virtual schools. But what I'm excited about is the work of this council is now sort of transitioning, and the DLAC is now supporting the launch of an artificial intelligence task force to help stakeholders understand the impact of AI on K-12 public education. And so working with DESE and working with others as well to kind of think about what are some ways that we can think about how AI will impact the work that we do. I read an interesting article the other day. It was called The End of Knowing. And as we think about, a lot of school has always been sort of this dissemination of knowledge, and that's certainly an important part of the work that we do. And how to create, a student body that is generative in the sense that they know how to access and use and create information as well. And so I'll keep you updated on any of this work that we're able to do with the DLAC, but it's a pretty diverse group of folks from across the state. So again, I always just feel like these are great opportunities to kind of hear state level conversations and bring them back to our three towns for sure. And then the final update from me is I just want to resurface that book, The Anxious Generation. If you haven't had a chance to read it yet, I mentioned it at our September meeting because I had it in my opening day presentation. I hadn't finished the book at that point. I have now finished the book, or I've got about 20 pages or so left, and just want to resurface it. It is, I think, a very, very well-written book. It's extraordinarily researched in terms of the impact that social media, the smartphone, video games have had on this generation of kids. And, I think when we grew up, it was a very embodied experience. And what I mean by embodied is here we are together, making connections, talking, learning how to navigate things. And social media can be a very disembodied experience, and video games can be a very disembodied experience. And kids may not be developing sort of the depth of the relationships that maybe we had the chance to develop as we navigated, childhood and adolescence. And one of the sort of the visuals that really resonates with me about this book is that he says, trees need wind in order to grow strong roots, right? I really love the visual of that. And it's the same with our kids, right? Our kids need to face some wind, so to speak, in order to grow those strong roots as well. And how do we build that resilience in our kids? And this idea of safetyism, where there's been an overemphasis on protecting young people from harm in the online world, and less so in the real world, and less so in the online world, right? That's sort of his basic theory behind the whole book, is that we have overprotected kids in the real world and less protected them. And he talks about how not you, but I'll use you in the general term, you wouldn't let your child go to the playground at 2:30 in the morning, right? Yet they're on the playground at 2:30 in the morning, and in much less of a way than we know about it, right? And so it's a very thought-provoking book for sure. It is written in a way that is very accessible to anybody, if you're a parent, if you're an educator. I know, Michelle, you said you're listening to it in the car.
Yeah, I'm probably about 4 hours into it on the Audible version, and
Yeah.
I've had it on a couple times when driving my 8th grader to and from his practices, and it sparked some pretty interesting conversations with him, hearing from his perspective.
Yeah.
He doesn't agree with a lot of their ideas, which maybe is my fault. But another analogy that the author used is the immune system, and
Yeah.
how you need to stress the immune system with germs in order to
Make it grow.
Strong,
Strong,
and be healthy,
yeah.
and become resilient. And it's just so interesting that the laws around social media. It feels like when these websites were first launched, they just came up with this arbitrary 13-year-old age limit and be like, no, if you're 13 years old, you have free reign to these social networks. Nothing, there was no research done, or, and now the author kind of says it really should be 16. And, I'm wondering if it's even, if it should be even higher than that. But it's very well written. I'm not even halfway through it yet, but I highly suggest any parent to give it a read.
It's kind of depressing, isn't it? I thought so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean by that for sure, but it's like it's good to, it's creating conversation.
Oh, for
Right?
sure.
I think it's
Yeah.
creating good conversation. You're right, this arbitrary 13-year-old.
Yeah.
And like, if you've seen any videos with the author, Jonathan Haidt, he'll go into a classroom of like middle schoolers or even, 6th grade kids. How many of you have Instagram? And the hands go up, and the kid's not 13, right? But you just
Yeah.
have to say, yes, I'm 13. Like there's no sort of verification of it and so on and so forth. So,
And it's more so social media affecting girls
Yes.
more, and video games affecting boys
Yep.
more. It's just very interesting, the upbringing of like a play-based childhood
Yeah.
versus a phone-based childhood, and it's really interesting.
it is, for sure. So I just wanted to resurface it, just in the event anyone else wants to take a read of it or do the audiobook thing. It's just, I would say, it's a book worthy of your time for sure, just to spur additional, I think, conversation for sure. So those are the updates, and happy to take any questions on any of the items presented.
Okay, moving on to the report from Mr. Greenberg.
All right, good evening, everyone. Included in the drive is the DESE end-of-year report, and it's a report that's filed with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education every year, and it reflects how every dollar is spent for the prior fiscal year, and in this case, FY24. It includes the operating budget, funds appropriated to the school on behalf of the town, for DPW expenses, health, wellness, things like that, as well as grants and revolving accounts. And so it's a full accounting of that under various reports. That document is included in the drive for your reading pleasure, and it will be audited. We'll be sending the information to a third party or an auditor to go through it, and then they issue a report to the state. So I will answer any questions the committee may have about the end-of-year report.
Which one is it in the drive?
24 EOY 184.
Okay, it is the other one.
Yeah.
I will say this is a bear.
Yeah, this is quite lengthy.
This is a bear,
okay.
and it's a bear times 3.
Yes.
So Steve does 3 of these, obviously, 1 for each town.
Right.
It is like Steve said, every dollar accounted for sure. And these are all Steve, just talk a little bit about how we build our budget almost based off the end of year report, because that's the reporting, right? Like our budget lines and how they align?
As far as why we have as many budget lines as we do, yes. That when you look at the end-of-year report and the kind of information that they want, that's why you'll see, like, just the operating budget alone has 268 expenditure lines. And then when you look at grants, why do they have so many different expenditure lines? Where the town will have 2 lines for us, one salaries, the other one non-salaries. But it's, again, the reporting requirement, and there are several schedules that we have to complete. So that's why we have the kind of account number structure that we have. If there aren't any questions, the second piece quickly is the October financial report, again, included in the drive. The thing that's a little different on this report is that we evolved or expanded the summary page to include a reconciliation piece that we use Infinite Visions, or what you see is Ivy on the left, for our operation, and the town uses Munis. And so we reconcile to the town on a regular basis. I'd like to see us reconcile in real time. That's a goal, so that we minimize variances. But it's to show the committee and the community that, we pay attention to the funding, we pay attention to what's going on in all aspects of it, not just the budget side of it, but how the funds are expended, and making sure that things are properly accounted for. So I will stop talking about that and answer any questions the committee may have on the financial report.
I have a question on the financial report, but last meeting we were talking about the roof project.
Yes.
Here, what is the timeline for that? And we allocated, you said 300,000 for the project manager, is that correct?
So as far as the timeline, the chair and I were talking about that briefly, that I believe that the MSBA, that board or that committee is meeting in October.
Late October, I think.
So this month. And then hopefully we'll have some idea if they want to partner with us in November, December, that's fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is the case, when we talk about the 300,000, that is the estimated, that's what we think the budget will be for design all the way through bidding.
Okay.
So that when we go to town meeting, I believe in May, if we can get it all the design done and be ready to go for May town meeting, that when we're asking for the funds for the construction, that we have a hard number because they've done all the bidding.
So I was approached that they want a special town meeting in December for this. What would that be for if last month we were talking about the town meeting in May?
Yeah, if they're trying to move it along, and that's where I want to be careful, because I'm not 100% up to speed, so I want to be careful, I don't want to misinform you, so I'd rather do a follow-up with the town administrator and then email you guys. I'm just giving you my perspective how it would work, because I don't think we could do a design in the engineering that quickly.
Right.
So when you talk about the special town meeting in December, I don't have an answer for that right now, but I will get you one.
So right now, do you see a need for a special town meeting for the roof project?
Yeah, I want to be careful. It's not my place. There could be other things that I'll say the town is thinking about and why they would want to do something that I'm not aware of. So I apologize that I'm dodging your question, but I just don't want to misinform you. So I'd rather make a couple calls and then email everybody with the exact answer versus a speculative answer.
Okay.
And Joe, my take, and I would want Steve to do the same thing. So when Justin had emailed, so Elena was the woman we're working with at MSBA. We had to sort of send them an email back because they want to know, are you, let's say, shovel ready, right? You know, they're out doing all these site visits. Remember, we went up and Michelle was on the roof and we visited the roof. So they did that 71 times because there were 71 applicants for the funding. And then they do a follow-up email. They want to know, like, okay, great, you're interested in partnering with the MSBA, but, you know, are you organized, right? Is your select board and your school committee both signed off on it? Do you have funding in the pocket, right? And so on and so forth. So we'll find out from Justin, but the way I read his email, he said, in regard to the district's funding schedule, this was to the MSBA, the voters of Middleton overwhelmingly approved the $300,000 for the purpose on the May 14th town meeting. We would be able to call a December 10th special town meeting if needed based on our current schedule. My take on it, and we'll get this verified, would be if the $300,000 wasn't enough for design and we needed additional funding for design. I think that's where he was trying to say to them, like, look, we still have the ability to call a town meeting if we had to. If we need additional design funds, we're taking a little bit of a guess with the $300,000, right, based upon what we think the roof will cost. But we'll follow up with Justin for sure, but I view our portion of that potential town meeting to be that. I also don't know if the town has some other reason for the town meeting also. I don't know if they have some other need that they have identified on the municipal side.
So as long as that came in below the 300, there wouldn't be a need to put that on a...
Wouldn't be a need for us.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, I don't know if the town has some other reason to do a town meeting. That's the question. We don't know.
When would you know that number of the 300 was sufficient?
That's a good question. I think once we're notified, we would probably start to do outreach, Steve, to designers, right? We would do
Yeah, so the way it will work is if they invite us in, they will assign the OPM and the architect, right? We don't go out to bid for that.
Correct.
MSBA assigns the architect to us. Then they will sit down and we will go through and they will give us like the hard quote to take us through bidding.
Okay.
All right, so we will know if as soon as we get signed the architect and we do a kickoff meeting, then those numbers will get crystallized, because we'll have to, of course, sign a contract to move forward.
What time frame is that, do you think?
Well, if they notify us in November, let's say kickoff meeting, and again, this is my opinion, kickoff meeting December, January, you know, and especially if we're trying to push for hard numbers in May, that's a lot of work to do. You know, I mean, granted, it's one section of the roof, but still, it's a lot of work to do.
Okay.
And so you want to have those numbers ready to go. And if they're closing the warrant in April or late March, you know, January, February, March, you've got a lot of work to do in several months.
Okay.
All right, so that's my opinion, and I'm going to email Justin now, so we'll
Okay.
figure that out.
Excellent.
Any other questions on the financial report? Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving over to report from the principals.
I'll go first this month. A couple of weeks ago, September 24th and 25th, we hosted our open houses. Very well attended. I saw a few of you there. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say we probably had 85 to 90% attendance. So very impressive with that. Last week, Monday and Tuesday, our sixth grade went to our annual Project Adventure field trip and had a great time. And I got to tell you, I think, to me, this was the best group that we brought over there in terms of their teamwork, their listening to the instructors, their willingness to get up there and climb and try new things, and had a great time. Today, we had Katie Greer, speaking of the internet and safety on the internet. Katie Greer has come to us. She comes every other year, so we do just 5th and 6th grade, and so we do every other year, so she'll be here not next year, the year after. For the kids that are now currently in 3rd and 4th grade, when they're in 5th and 6th grade, they'll see the presentation, and in about 35 minutes, the parent presentation starts as well. We're hoping, I think we had 20 people that were registered. I'm hoping many more were not registered will actually show up as well, or registered late, because I think this is, as I said to the kids this morning, I think this is the most important assembly that we do for this, because all the reasons that Scott said
Fits in with
before.
the book.
Yeah, it fits in perfectly with the book. And to tag on to that, and I'll be sending communication home to How Manning families. I'll talk to Dr. Roberts to see if we want to open it up to Fuller Meadow as well, but trying to do a community book club around the anxious generation. I've kind of polled my teachers. I think I have enough interest to do it there, but we're not going to make the biggest difference. I think it needs to be a groundswell of the whole community, because a lot of parts in there is, and they interview a lot of the kids and everything else, that they don't actually like the social media and spending all that time, but they're afraid that they're going to miss something. And just why they do it, because they have to be up to date and see the latest videos and everything else. So if we can somehow, at least at a community level, kind of put a stop to that, but it's going to take a whole lot of families making that step to not provide smartphones to their kids. But that'll be coming to see if we get enough interest to actually do that. This Friday, just as a reminder, is early release for professional development. That is also followed by a 3-day weekend. October 24th and 25th are parent conference dates. Those are early release days as well. If teachers have not sent out their sign-ups, those will be coming shortly to get those sign-ups done on that. Our annual Booster-thon kicks off October 21st with the fun run on the 29th. And PTO talked about last month when they were here as well. And then lastly, next Thursday, not this coming Thursday, the Thursday after the 17th, is Howie's presentation at MassQ. We will be presenting at 10:15, and I expect a large audience, just based on looking at all the other sessions at 10:15 seem awful boring. So I would imagine everybody will be coming to our session.
That's at 10:15, you said?
That is at 10:15,
Which day?
the 17th.
17th.
Are you going?
Oh, I'm
The
going.
Thursday,
Yes, I'm going.
yes.
I will try to get down for that presentation, Jeff.
And then we're going to be, Howie and I will be on the MassQ podcast, I think at 11:30 that day as well, to talk about Howie as well.
And that's the one at Gillette?
That's the one at Gillette, yes.
Does he get to run down the field?
I highly doubt it.
Probably be the most exciting thing that's happened.
We can always try. They can, sometimes it's better to beg forgiveness than ask for permission.
I did have one question I
Sure.
got from a parent. You know the agenda books that the students get at the
Yes.
beginning of the year? Do all grades get those?
They are
For all
available to
classes?
all, not all teachers necessarily use them, but they're available
Okay.
to all of them. And if the parents wanted to use it, we have them.
Okay.
So they should reach out to me.
Okay, all right, very good, thank you.
What is the presentation that day?
When?
What? Like, what's the topic?
So the theme of the whole conference is Beyond the Visible, Supporting All Learners. The topic, the name of ours is Howie's How Manning Journey, Comfort Dogs in Schools.
Okay. And just a little side note to that, Jeff and I had a meeting with 2 staff members at a school in Boxford, I'll leave it that way just because we don't know yet, who are interested in maybe having a dog there. I mean, I'd love it, it'd be great if all 6 schools, right, like, had it somewhere or another, it'd be fabulous. This was not a principal, this was a teacher who brought this forward, but knows the same breeder and all that jazz. And so we're trying to see if we can make that work at that school as well. So that'd be interesting. And we just have to get one of the Topsfield schools on board and have at least one in each town,
Yeah.
which should be pretty cool.
Can I
And
ask-
one at central office, he's going to ask me right now. Ready? Go ahead.
No, that's not it.
Okay.
I think I could get away with that, though, but my question was, when I go to the session and if I sit in the front row, will I be a distraction? I mean, just.
I'm
'cause,
prety sure.
You know,
Apparently, he's taking more to Jackie than you, so
Wait,
Jackie.
even without the dog, you'd be a distraction.
you should go to improving attendance within an MTSS context. I think that's a good one for you.
is that next?
It's in the suite right next door.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's it.
All of the dates that Jeff brought up are the same for Fuller Meadow. I was going to tell you about all the different things, right? Conferences coming up, fun run, all of that, same date. So ditto at Fuller Meadow. We too, and I did want to bring up the community that I live in, did this as a book group, the book that, Jeff was just talking about, that we should try to get that going. And they really, what they did is they started a community-wide conversation so that parents could kind of access that. I mean, they're really taking it to another level. They have signs on lawns and promoting, sort of the whole phone issue. And I think it's trying to build a sense of comfort for parents that if you want to engage in this, you have friends and neighbors who are going to do it as well. I think the hardest thing for parents, and what you hear in the book, is that, you can't do this all by yourself, because if your kid's going to be completely alienated and nobody else is doing it. But then, when people join together, it often has more power in it. So it really is, a good thing to consider, so for sure. Our curriculum night was a success, same as Hal Manning. We had great attendance. It's so wonderful to walk around and see the presentations that all the teachers work so hard on. They really work as teams, the grade levels, so pretty much what you see in any classroom, there's a consistent message. Parents leave really understanding what's happening in the classroom, what the routines look like, what's the day in the life of my child at school. So it was a really successful night. We are noticing more and more children attending with parents. I actually had a conversation with a couple of the EL teachers because, sometimes I was sort of noticing, like, is it a community connection thing that, if you're not totally connected in your community, or you don't have relatives, or who can watch your little ones, and both parents want to come. So we're kind of exploring that a little bit. Is it that people don't know and they're not really reading the fine print on what we send out, or is it they really want to come and they can't figure out what to do about childcare? So we're just sort of putting our toe in the water, trying to sort that out a little bit. It was sort of noticeable this year that it was a lot more prevalent. The last few weeks, we've been busy collecting all of our benchmark data, math and reading, and next week we have all of our data meetings where we, sort of look at the instruction, what's happening at the classroom level, tier 1, what are the trends we're seeing, what things might we want to refine or adjust a little bit, and then we start looking at potential for kids that have some skill deficits that we want to put into a second tier group. Which is still general education, but it's just giving them a boost, win time, a little bit every day. Angelica's continues to be really a godsend right now. It works just as well as the golf course did. Big space. Once in a while, if I have to shoot out to get to a meeting, I can see it from the street level, and the staff who does duty over there, they're doing a remarkable job of kind of dealing with the traffic. I think they could go work at Gillette and they'd have it all figured out. So we appreciate that. Middleton Fire has started something new with us. It's wonderful. They're coming in and doing safety lessons with all of the students. Oftentimes when you partner with outside organizations, the message is there, but the developmentally appropriate way of delivering it with 5 or 6 year olds might be a little lost. These guys are so amazing. I cannot tell you, when you go in and watch how they approach this with young students, with the visuals and the graphics. They have a big, like a black screen that they pull up, and they're trying to show kids how you want to go low if there's smoke in your room, and the guy gets on his belly, and I was so struck by how well they did this, right? I think of these fire guys, right? Unbelievable. I emailed Doug LaCoste, I sent him pictures, and I said, you should really commend your guys for the work they're doing with these little kids. And the kids are just like enthralled. So I can't say enough about how successful that's been. October, we're in it. We're going to start our relationship mapping. We've kind of refined that process a little bit. It's a little tricky with kindergartners because you're asking who they have connections with. Most of them are going to say their teacher, right? Because they haven't kind of been out and about in the world a whole lot within the school. But we do go through, and we have everybody in the building do this and sort of identify. We look for kids that maybe you're noticing a little bit of a trend that they're not feeling as connected. And then we set up our mentor program where the adults in the building that are willing to mentor a student, they get matched up, and usually once a week you do something with them. You color, you play basketball, go for walks, whatever it is that the child feels connected about. So we'll be setting that up by the end of the month. Same thing, fun run, October 29th. And lastly, the Fuller Meadow Halloween Parade. Holy cow. You rock Middleton's world, right? 9:45 in the morning on, it's actually on Halloween, right? It's a Thursday, yeah, on Halloween. So that's always fun. Already got my costume.
Oh,
Can't tell you that
I was just
top
going to say, it's
secret.
top secret, right?
Top secret, nobody knows. Nobody. So that is it, unless you have any questions.
no, that all sounds great.
Okay.
Anybody else? No?
Can I just ask staffing for both of you? Are you still missing anybody? Everybody all?
Same two positions we haven't been able to fill. One is a TA in our specialized program, and the other is we have a 3-day-a-week building substitute. That person ended up taking a full-time job within the building, and I thought this would be so easy to fill. I'm so surprised, and it's really causing us a bit of a hardship. Like, we have IEP meetings like all day today, and you're juggling, you know, so it's really been tricky. If anybody knows anybody, I don't know how else to approach this. So, those two positions, and there's nothing happening.
Two, excuse me, same two IA openings. But again, no movement, no applicants.
Does Brian need to repost to get him back to the top of school?
Just
He did a week
He did
ago.
already, okay.
There's been no activity.
Okay.
Okay, interesting. Okay, moving on to new business. I'm not seeing any gifts or grants.
Correct.
And then the TTU coalition bargaining.
Yeah, for folks that may not be on the negotiating subcommittee, so Dave and Michelle are our negotiating subcommittee members. As we head into this year, both of our Unit A and Unit B contracts are expiring at the end of this school year. And so we've started the process of just laying down sort of a foundation of how we're going to pursue this year. And one of the things we're going to try this year that has been different from past years is this idea of coalition bargaining. And what that means is all three towns maybe doing some work together in the beginning. When we think about the contract and the way we've talked about it in some of our early planning meetings, there's language things in the contracts, there's language with a little bit of money associated with it, and then there's the COLAs and the salary and those pieces as well. And we see a real opportunity across all three towns to look at language items, and perhaps even the language with a little bit of dollars associated with it. One of the challenges, regionalization was one of those things that, you know, when we were pursuing that as a potential conversation, one of the challenges that we always find, and for those of you that sat on a negotiation committee in the past know this, we'll have our Middleton meeting on one week, and then whether you have some momentum or no momentum, you're not back again until about 3 to 4 weeks later, because then the next week you're in Boxford, then the next week you're in Topsfield, and then it's now, you know, three or 4 months will go by and you've had 4 negotiating meetings in one town because of the 3-town structure. Whereas in a typical school district, 3 or 4 months will go by and you might have had, you know, 8 to 10 meetings associated with negotiation. So we're trying to figure out a way to be more efficient, effective. I've had a number of conversations with our association colleagues, and they're interested in trying this out. And we had a meeting with our school committee negotiating teams across all 3 towns, so the Michelle and Dave across all 3 towns. And there's an interest in trying this, so I'm excited about it. I think it's a real opportunity for us to maybe be more efficient than we have been in the past, and we'll keep you updated. Typically, we get going in December, January timeframe with the goal. You know, we're really trying to set a goal to be buttoned up by June of this year. I think that's a real positive goal that we all have, and not extending into the summer and into the next school year. Because again, that just takes time from, you know, other things that everybody could be working on in the school district. So keep you guys tuned in on that for sure. But I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add as the negotiating members, but I think it's a real opportunity.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to, you know, getting started a little bit earlier and also making it more efficient
Yeah.
for sure. So hopefully we can, you know, have our meetings closer together, so and not so spread out. But I definitely think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
With all three towns, same representatives, like obviously getting them together ahead of time is like huge.
Yeah.
I think.
For sure.
Trying to iron out the small stuff.
Yep, exactly. And see if we can't knock out some of that small stuff. So we'll keep everybody tuned in on that. MLTS, I queued this up at the last meeting. Remember we had talked about the 911 law at the state, that, you know, you have to move to like a dispatchable location, so it's no longer, if you call 911 from room 3 at Fuller Meadow, it doesn't just come up at Fuller Meadow, it comes up as room 3 Fuller Meadow. So we had started this work across the Tri-Town. We had started in Topsfield this summer, and then we had a plan to move ahead with Boxford and move ahead with Middleton. The state has sort of moved up the agenda on this, and so in the drive, it says VCM Meadow E91 program. That's the emergency 911 program. So we had set around 15. This came in at 13.3 for Fuller Meadow. And so we do not have a Hal Manning quote for you tonight. We just have the Fuller Meadow one, and we'd be seeking a motion when we get to that point in time. Again, unbudgeted expenses, we know early enough in the school year that Steve is in a spot where we can navigate, and this is also something we have to do. So we want to make sure we get after it. The system at Hal Manning is a different system. We use an NEC system here at Fuller, and Hal Manning being a newer building, they have a newer system. And so we're working on that quote. Steve's working with the vendors, so we hope to have that for you at our November meeting. But this is the quote for Fuller Meadow in order for us to proceed with the work there. It's kind of like a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, so it's not like they need to be in here, you know, touching every single phone. It's more software and back-end kind of an endeavor. So happy to take any further questions on that. And if none, we'll be seeking a motion to approve the Fuller Meadow E911 proposal as presented.
Because Hal Manning is a newer school, a newer system, do you think that the cost of that will be a little bit less than this?
It is, we were talking about it this afternoon. There's more to it than that, and
Okay.
it's not that it's because it's a newer school. The phone system is a different phone system, and we've got to find out if it's compatible. We may wind up having to, worst case scenario, we may wind up having to replace the phone system. So that's why we don't have that quote yet. So there's those particulars that are being
Yeah.
worked through.
Yeah, we don't know if it's compatible yet.
Okay.
So they're doing that work right now to figure out if it is. If it is, my guess is it'll be in this range. If it's not, it'll be more.
A different number.
Yeah, a different number, yeah, for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Oh, was he snoring?
Oh, something else. Snoring out the other end. Exactly.
That's why I'm glad he sits over there now. He used to do it over here.
Sweet Lord. Thank you, Howie. Sorry to embarrass you.
You're right. He is spending closer to Jack.
He doesn't seem to care that he was embarrassed, Jackie.
No, he just.
Not in the least.
No.
I was teasing her more, but okay.
Okay, so what would be the language for the motion?
To approve the Fuller Meadow E911 proposal as presented.
Okay, I will make the motion to approve the E911 proposal as presented
I'll second that motion.
for Fuller Meadow.
Thank you. Thank you both.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay.
Jen kind of gave her school campus traffic circulation update in her principal report, just that we're grateful that it's working well. Our hope is that we can continue this train all the way through the end of the year. Right now, I don't have anything to tell me differently. And I know Jeff has an update as well with some of the work we've been doing at Hal Manning. Dave has had some conversations as well. And I know there was a Zoom meeting about a week or so ago. I know I was on for a little bit of it, but if you want to talk a little bit about sort of the research and data you collected, Jeff, and
Yeah.
what you're leaning towards.
If, I think some of you are aware, I've spent 2 weeks standing out at the intersection of Central and Washington, counting the number of cars that were on the street, not total number in the line, just the ones that end up on Washington and Central. And doing that in 5-minute increments and seeing how many cars on average per day we have sitting out there. And then looking at options where we could change our queuing system to get more cars on the campus and off the streets, while at the same time maintaining the efficiency and safety of our dismissal procedures. I looked at 3 options, really. Only one was what I considered to be viable, which would be bringing the cars down into the parking lot on at the end of Central, looping them around the cars that are parked there, and then taking the right into the driveway, which would take about 20 cars off of the streets. We topped out, I think the average at 2:57 in the afternoon, which was the busiest time, average was about 33 cars, 33, 38 cars sitting on those two streets. So if we can get 20 of those off, I think it's going to make a big difference. We haven't started it yet for two reasons. One, I just need to continue to collect a little bit of data looking at that parking lot to make sure that we're not marked spaces. There's enough room for cars to loop around. I just need to make sure that we're not routinely parking in unmarked spaces so that we don't end up trying to do that loop and then all of a sudden you get stuck in there because we can't actually go all the way around and creating a complete disaster. The other reason I want to have a clean week of just regular day dismissals, that I'm available to be out there all 5 days, kind of down at the end directing traffic. We've had these half days in there, which make things a little bit wonky. We end up with a lot more grandparents picking up and carpooling and everything else, so I want to have as regular as possible. I've also had some meetings at the end of the day. I haven't been able to be out at dismissal, so I want to make sure that we have 5 fresh days that I'm available out there to be able to do it. So we're looking at it probably a couple more weeks. We're working on our efficiency out back as well, trying to make sure that that's going as fast as possible. I know it could be annoying to some people to be able to see your kid and we're not letting you get him yet because we want to make sure that we have a steady flow of cars going all the way up to the end of the curb. And we load as many as we can at one time and get them out at the same time so we can bring in that equal number of cars there. So hopefully all of that combined will make it a little less congested in the Howe Manning neighborhood.
So I can add to that. I'm working with some members in that neighborhood who are concerned about child safety and also, just the traffic situation that, is difficult for them. So there's been like a comprehensive plan in terms of like a municipal project that would be, they put in a couple things. They put a few speed humps in to try to alleviate it, but it's only like a fraction of what they had recommended done. So they're going to hand me the plan, and I plan on going to see Justin, the town manager, just to discuss if that project could even be like financially feasible. It's pretty sizable. There's like probably 2 or 3 raised sidewalks, more speed humps. So I don't think that would be a detriment to the school, but it would be good for the safety of the kids, slow traffic down, because people do speed down the street when kids are walking. And there's certain areas that it's kind of difficult for the kids to actually cross, and some people are dropping off where they're not supposed to drop off. So I'm going to plan on speaking to Justin. So I have like one more meeting with people from the neighborhood, and then I'm going to probably go see the town manager, see if it's even a possibility.
Okay, thank you for doing that.
Yep.
Okay.
Student achievement updates. We
Yes.
welcome Peggy and Matt. Peggy, if you could turn that screen just a little bit. You tried, okay. That's okay. If it's, I don't want to mess with it, yeah. I mean, it's in everyone's drive. The PDF is in the drive. We'll leave it up there. That way Paul can capture it as well for TV. Just appreciate the work Peggy and Matt and their teams have been doing. We came to you last year to talk about this logic model in terms of student achievement, and really logic models, as Peggy will say, is a fancy way of saying sort of the action plan that we are putting in place as it relates to the gap that we're seeing with special ed and regular ed as it comes to some of our standardized testing and things like that. So I'll let them take it from there. Again, it's in the drive if you can't see the screen from where you're sitting. And Peggy and Matt, over to you.
I'll just try. You guys start.
The wheels are locked,
Yeah.
is the problem. I couldn't get them unlocked. But maybe you can.
Okay.
You should be able to see this in your drive, but this is the diagram. We talked to you before about the fact that we've been using a process called the using data process, originally developed by Turk. It is an evidence-based model for thinking about analyzing data to inform student achievement. And we've been using this.
I'm gonna knock it over.
Okay, there we go. We've been using this for the last almost 2 years now that we've been kind of exploring this topic. And we use this process for other reasons as well within the district. So it starts off by building a foundation, so really understanding our local, demographics, our local sort of factors that go into our student achievement, and also building the capacity of the team to understand how to use this process. So that's all building that foundation. You'll notice that there are arrows between each of these sections on here. They say data or data and research, because each phase of this is informed by both, right? So we don't kind of move on until we've looked at both data and research. So the first thing that we do is we identify with data what is referred to as a student learning problem. So an area of student achievement that we feel could be improved, and then just verify what that issue is with data. From there, we move on to using both data and research to come up with what we think might be some root causes for why might this particular achievement issue exist, what's driving it. So that would inform then an ability for us to generate some solutions that are based on what we believe to be the root causes. Because if you don't properly identify the root cause, you could put a solution in place and it won't actually do anything because it wasn't addressing what was causing the problem to begin with. So it is a time-intensive process that does require us to look not only at data to verify that it's true in our local context, but also that research would suggest that that is like a common cause for that particular problem, basically. And then when we get into the generating solutions phase, we're again looking at data and we're asking ourselves, what are some evidence-based interventions that would allow us to address that type of an achievement gap? So like what has been successful in other places, things that would suggest that if we implemented them here, we would likely see some gains in that student achievement. And that's where we are sort of right now. What we're going to be presenting to you tonight is that we've worked our way through to the generating solutions phase, and we've created these logic models that we're going to present to you that really outline what we see as potential solutions that we want to plan to implement, and during that implementation phase to continue to monitor what's happening. And hopefully, if this all works as planned, we will see gains in student achievement. So that's kind of the process that we've been following. In terms of how logic models work, so this is just an example based on the Common Cold. So just like I don't know if a study showed like children, school-age children get somewhere between like 8 and 12 colds a year. And for parents, all of you are parents, you know how like disruptive that can be to your lives, and they keep getting sick and then you keep getting sick. And so thinking about how can you reduce that? How would you actually help your child to stay more healthy? And thinking about what a root cause of that might be, it could be an issue around hygiene. Thinking about how hand washing, for example. So that when you're thinking about the problem, you have the problem and then you set a goal. So our goal here would be they're getting H12 colds. Our goal is we're going to try to reduce that by 1/3, and we're identifying our root cause as poor hygiene is contributing or leading to illness. So when we think about the strategies that we would use strategies that are kind of known within the field of health to actually help prevent disease transmission. So one would be washing your hands properly. Another one might be sneezing into your elbow or blowing your nose on a tissue and throwing it away so you don't spread those germs to anybody else. And then finally, teaching kids to prevent contact with the germs to begin with. So don't put things in their mouths, don't share utensils, things that would keep them from having contact to begin with. So if you notice, the strategies are listed here, and we always want our strategies to be based in evidence. So there's some research out there that would suggest that these strategies would be effective. And then in the middle column, this is really where it gets its name, the logic model, because we articulate what we think we'll gain by putting that in place. And so here, we're either going to eliminate germs, prevent the spread of germs, or we're going to prevent contact with germs to begin with. And all of those things together, we would monitor all of those things via observation for the most part with children to see how they're doing with that. And that should have the effect of making them ill less often. So that's how the model works, and that's how the chart works in terms of how you put things together. So I put into the context all the work we've been doing around literacy for the last 3 years into the context of a logic model. This is not the work of the joint coordinators. This is just a reflection of the work that we've been doing in the district. So it shows you how a logic model works, and it gives you the added benefit of getting a little literacy update while we're at it, thinking about where we are with all of that work. So in terms of the student learning problem, one of the things that we had noticed, particularly in our youngest students, K and 1, is that they weren't at the benchmarks that we wanted to see them at. And generally, you want to see on a universal screener 80 to 85% of your students at benchmark. That's an indicator of strong Tier 1 instruction, because there are always going to be some students who are going to need more than just regular classroom instruction. So they might need RTI, they might need special education services, But just based on that Tier 1 instruction, we would want to see 80 to 85% of our students reaching benchmark by the end of the year. And if that's not happening, then that kind of tells us that we need to look at Tier 1 and strengthening that in order to see that growth. And ultimately, so what we've said here is we're saying that we weren't seeing that in K and 1. And then we also are saying that we wanted it to get to 85%. So that's the goal. So some of the things that we had laid out here, thinking about the cause of this, is that our early literacy practices were not completely aligned to the science of reading research. So some of the things that we set out doing as a district, early on, we had implemented the Haggerty Phonemic Awareness curriculum because phonemic awareness is really critical to reading development. It's the ability for kids to be able to isolate and hear sounds so that they can then attach them to letters and be able to lift those letters off the page and make sense of them as words. So if they have weak phonemic awareness, they're not able to make all of those connections, and it really impedes reading progress. And it is actually a hallmark of dyslexia as well for students to have a weakness in phonemic awareness. So it's something that we put into place. I guess this is our 5th year now using Haggerty, and it's been amazing. What we've seen in our data is that the kids just took to it, and it makes a huge difference in how the kids are doing. And just this past spring, so the phoneme segmentation fluency is the measure on our universal screening that tells us how students were doing. And across the Tri-Town, we had students anywhere between 87 to 94% at or above benchmark in that phonemic awareness. So we have actually exceeded our target when it comes to that based on that curriculum. One of the other things that we felt was really important is to train all of our teachers in the Tri-Town in the science of reading research. So everybody took this 25-hour course that we offered during the school day or on professional learning time, and we have actually, and we're starting as new people are coming on board to offer an asynchronous version of that outside of school as well, so we keep people abreast of that. But that was really important because how people had been trained was not necessarily what the latest research was showing, so we felt it was really important to train everybody on kind of the research, how things needed to shift. And we then more specifically train people in the Hill Foundational Skills Lesson Plan. That's for our K-3 teachers, and that is based on Orton-Gillingham, which is a methodology. So it's not exactly Orton-Gillingham, but it mirrors Orton-Gillingham, and it's called a structured literacy approach that really can address reading issues for students and change outcomes. So we felt it was really important to train all of our K-3 teachers on that, and they use those routines in connection with our phonics program foundations. Another thing that you all supported us with, which we're grateful, is purchasing those decodable texts, because we didn't have as many as we needed, or had hardly any, as a matter of fact. And it's a tool that we really needed in order to enact these lesson plans and to be reinforcing our phonics instruction and connected text. And that's what the research shows that you need to do in order for kids to really master those phonics concepts. So that was an enormously important thing for us to do. And the thing that we're doing right now is we're evaluating core ELA programs. So based on all of the work that we've done, if you think about the two facets that go into reading comprehension, one is word recognition, and all of those phonics skills contribute, and phonemic awareness contributes to that word recognition. The other part is is language comprehension. So it's students' oral language, it's their vocabulary, it's their background knowledge. If they don't have the vocabulary, then they can't really make sense of words on the page. And your reading comprehension cannot actually exceed your listening comprehension. So it's something that we need to be developing alongside all of this word recognition. We currently have in K-3, we have the genre units, which were well done. The people who worked on them did a really nice job, but they do reflect an older methodology, and we feel like we could have resources that are more aligned with all of the training that we've done with teachers. And then in 4 to 6, we really don't have consistent resources. So those are grade levels that we need to be supporting better with resources, and that's one of the reasons we're looking at it. So we're looking at a program that can support language comprehension. We're also looking for a program that can support writing instruction, because our data continues to tell us that that is a need for us. Our reading scores are much better than our writing scores when we get to MCAS, and I'll show you that next month, but that's one of the reasons why we feel like that's something that we need to do. So we've had a committee working since last January, evaluating. They've been meeting weekly, evaluating all of the tools that are on the market. We're in a pilot right now where we're piloting 2 different programs, and our goal is to be able to make a decision in December, and then be bringing that forward in the budget process during this next budget season. So that's all the work that we've been doing around literacy, and just to celebrate some of the success that's come from that. So we can see how we're doing in literacy, and this logic model had specifically focused in on KN1, so I'm going to show you our KN1 data. So this is M-Class is the universal screener that we use, and you can kind of see these blocks going up, and you'll notice it says VOI, MOI, and EOI. That stands for beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year, because we universally screen 3 times a year. And as the year goes up, the benchmarks rise. So a score that you could get to be at benchmark at the beginning of the year, if you did not improve, you would no longer be at benchmark by the end of the year, because the expectations rise throughout the year. So that's just to visually show you that it's important to see that expectations are going up. So we would want to at least see students staying at the same level, but ideally we want to see them, the numbers of students who are at risk decreasing, so that we have more students, making the progress that we would like to see. So this is the data. It's a little hard to see here on the screen. If you can look at kind of that top line there. So we have kindergarten and grade 1 represented. This is the end of year scores from M-Class. That at the beginning of the year, you can see we had just over 50% of our students, and the key at the top is that you have students who are in the blue who are above benchmark, green is at benchmark, yellow is below benchmark, and red is well below benchmark. So you can see that when we started off in kindergarten, and this is like how kids come to us, right? This is not, we haven't had an opportunity really to instruct them yet at this point. We had like 51% of our students who were not at benchmark, right? So a little over half were not at benchmark. By the end of the year, we had only 16% were below benchmark, right? So that enormous gain across the year. And first grade, very similar. We were looking at about 40% being below benchmark. By the end of the year, we were at 18%. And then when we're looking at the number of percentage of kids going above benchmark, we started in kindergarten, only 23% of the kids above benchmark. That number doubled to 46% by the end of the year. So almost half of our students are not only at benchmark, they're actually exceeding the benchmark. And these are based on national norms. And you have very similar data. We went from 27% to 39% in the above category as well. So we can see that we're seeing really great gains from all of the work that we've been doing around literacy. Another way to see that is looking at AIMSweb, which is our old screener, and comparing it to M-Class and seeing how these scores have improved over the last 3 years. So AIMSweb set the cutoff for benchmark at the 26th percentile. That is unusually low. Most benchmark screeners do set the cutoff at the 40th percentile, as does M-Class. So it's an unfair comparison to look at them head to head, because they're not like comparing the same percentages of students. So looking back at the data and just looking to see who was like 40th percentile or above, when we looked at AIMSweb, allows us to do a more direct comparison of how students were achieving. So when we look back in the spring of 22, according to AIMSweb, we had 69% of our kids at benchmark. But if you level set that to the 40th percentile, we only had 54% of our kids at benchmark. In 23, it said 77%, but again, at the 40th percentile, only 57%. This spring, 84%. All right, and we were looking for that data to be in that 80 to 85% range, so we are there. And you can see that that's an almost 30% gain from the previous years in terms of the achievement. Then when we're looking at grade 1, that 22 was they did very well. That was a particularly strong cohort. From kindergarten on, that group performed very well. And according to AIMSweb, we had 89% at the end of the year, but when you level set it to 45 to the 40th percentile, it's 75%, which is very good, but again, just a little shy of where we want to see them.
I have a quick question.
The next year, in 2023, that's a little bit more consistent.
I have a quick question.
Oh, sure.
So that screen that you're on right now,
Yeah.
grade 1, that's all different classes, right? It's not
Whole grade.
right, but it's not like starting in first grade and then following them to second grade and
No.
then to third.
No, different
Okay.
cohorts of kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
First grade is in 22,
Okay.
first grade is in 23,
Yep.
first grade is in 24.
Yeah, exactly. So it's as the kids are moving through, they're not the same kids from year to year, but
Okay.
it's just saying how we're doing at a particular grade
Okay.
level, given the curriculum changes that we've made. So when we're looking at that spring of 23, we're seeing that 64% drops to 53%, and then when we get into the spring of 24, we're at 82%. So really, really nice gains that we're seeing overall. And I think just a kind of proof that our logic model is working, and that we're seeing the kinds of growth that we were hoping to see as a result of this, and hoping to continue to see, because we're not done yet. We have more work to do, other grade levels that we're looking to target and to improve related to literacy.
Do you have the data, though, as comparing it to the same cohort year over year?
We do, but typically when you're looking at this data, you're looking at a grade level from year
Okay.
to year, because, so if you wanted to know how individual students are achieving, then you'd follow a cohort. If you're interested in how your curriculum is working, you're looking at year over year, kind of
Okay.
like the same grade level. I mean, they're both valid ways of looking at the data, but we were trying to demonstrate here that, like, the work that we had done to strengthen grade 1 curriculum is having an impact on grade 1 achievement.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have some questions. I've been here almost 2.5 years now. I know when I first came on, there was a lot of talk about how the students were doing when, based on what happened during COVID.
Right.
And how there was a lack of, gap of, like, especially literacy and things like that.
Right.
Has there been, like, any study or any kind of measurement of how those students are doing, the ones that were maybe falling behind? I know it's separate from this, but is it?
Yeah,
is
I
there any
mean,
kind
our
of-
own studies or national
Yeah,
studies? you mean?
your own studies. I mean, is there any, like,
Yeah, I think
I don't-
we're seeing kids, bouncing back,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I think that they're maybe not at the level that they would have been prior to the pandemic, and that's
Yeah.
the same trend that the state is seeing. So MCAS has bounced back across the state, but we're still, sometimes as much as 10, 12 percentage points below where kids were pre-pandemic, right? And so the impact lingers. We certainly have seen the kids turn a corner coming out of that, but I mean, that it is cumulative, those skills. So it's required more remediation, in order to get kids kind of back to a level that we'd like to see. That's one of the reasons why, because we did see almost immediately and early on a huge impact on our youngest students, which is why for a few years that we had that summer academy, and that was intended to kind of work with those groups. We're not seeing that in our data anymore, right? And so that need for that extra summer supplemental instruction is just not apparent in the data at this point, which is good news. So, yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's been in education will tell you that the pandemic was pretty devastating, right, to education, but our teachers have worked really hard, and I feel like we are getting kids back to where they need to be. Any other questions? Okay. All right, so on to the work of the joint coordinators. And so this is a group that Matt and I work with. So it's all of the special ed coordinators, all of the curriculum coordinators, Matt and myself, and also our district L coordinator. So we've been meeting monthly for a couple of years now and really looking at this issue of special education achievement, because there is a gap between the performance of our regular education students and our special education students, and it was apparent in MCAS. Now, there's always going to be some gap, just because the nature of qualifying for special ed means that there's a gap, but we want to make sure that that gap isn't as wide as it is currently, and we're looking at how we can address that. When we were thinking about looking at that data, though, in this group, MCAS is less than useful because it's only for our older grades, and it really doesn't tell us a whole lot about our K-2. And it's only like once a year that we get that data point. So as we were exploring this more, we switched over to looking at our universal screening data, because we do have that for all grade levels, and we're able to see growth for all grade levels. So that was just a little bit more informative to us in terms of kind of looking at what was happening, since we could see all students through that measure. But the conversation originally was sparked thinking about what was going on in our MCAS data. So we had, Matt's actually going to talk about this, and we talked a little bit about this last year, so he'll kind of refresh.
So one of the things we wanted to do is kind of take you back a little bit to last year when we came and talked about where we were at in the process of these conversations. And one of the things, if you were on the committee before, that we identified fairly early on in the conversation was that we were seeing a pretty large transition of our special education teachers, either into other roles in the district or actually leaving the district and going to other positions. There's a lot of different reasons for that, but one of the things that was important to us that really flagged for us right off the bat is that when you have a transition like that, and I use the word transition instead of turnover, mainly because we did and we do have teachers that stay in the district, and so that's a turnover for special ed, but it's not a turnover for Middleton, right? But one of the things that happens when that occurs is that all the training, all the specialized training that we put those teachers, that we had those teachers do and funded through the district and got them trained specifically to work with groups of students, that training goes with the teacher, right? It's not something that you can leave behind. It's professional development that they've had. And then typically, when you replace those positions, typically the person coming in does not have as much training as a person exiting that role, right? So right off the bat, what we identified was something that we really need to do to set up, to ensure that if we are seeing this transition year over year, we need to just accommodate for that and make sure that we have a professional development plan and a training plan in place as the new teachers come in. So what we did at the time, and this was at some point last year when we started to do it, is we really took an inventory of all of our special ed teachers and the training, and when I talk about trainings, I'm talking I'm talking about specialized trainings on top of what all the teachers get in the district, and that's things like Wilson training and specific math training, reading training that you would use in a setting with a special ed student. Okay, so what we did is we took inventory of all the teachers that we have and what certifications and trainings they have, and then the work was done to really project out two different things. One is we created these kind of training trees where it's what do we want all of our special ed teachers to have in regards to literacy and math, and then how do we get them there, right? What are the actual trainings we need to do? And this is just an example that we brought to you last year. These are now much more fleshed out where you would get to this piece and it might have 3 more branches. So we've created these training trees, and we took all of the database of what our teachers currently have and basically sat down and projected out 3 to 5 years of what do we need in every building? What do we need for trainings in every building? Who do we have that has it and who doesn't have it? And then how can we set up the training structure? Because as you could realize, these are not simple, quick little trainings. These are very intensive trainings that take a lot of time, right? So it's not as though we could have somebody come in new and all of a sudden within a year have them up to speed on everything that we need them to be trained on, maybe that in the same as the person went out. So it's like a 3 to 5 year, okay, if we're going to do this for the first 6 months of being in this role, maybe we can get 2 of these trainings in a year, but we really mapped it out. So it's not only everything we want them to have, but then the existing staff that we have, what they have, and how we mapped it out. So if then we do have a gap, we can get the new person in on the new training plan right off the bat. So this was something we identified very early on in the process, and we set up these structures for it. But we just wanted to kind of loop it back and show it to you. At the time, we also came to you and said, we've really identified this teacher training piece, and what's starting to show some evidence through our exploration is kind of this math piece and how we want to look a little bit deeper into specialized math instruction. What does that look like, and really what programs are out there? And that started to bubble. And then the other one was really taking a hard look at what does our service delivery model look like for special ed kids. And when I talk about that, what I mean is, and I've presented kind of the different categories before, but full inclusion, which means they're getting their special ed services in the general education classroom. And then anytime the student is removed from the classroom for a service, it just becomes more restrictive. That's kind of the language around special ed. So there's students who might get all their services in the general ed classroom. There's some that might get services in the classroom and get a little bit of pull-out. And then there's kids that might get less in the general ed and more pull-out. And so this started to show a little bit. So in part of our, and you'll see it in the logic models that we came up with, one of the things we did as a real deep dive is that we really took every student in the district and we mapped out their progress both on MCAS and the universal screeners. And we looked at not only achievement scores, like what their score was, but as Peggy said, one of the things that was really important to us was their growth scores, right? Because it's an individualized education plan is really about the student making growth on their goals on there, right? So if we're looking at their universal screeners and their MCAS scores, what we want to see is we're not only comparing that student achievement score-wise to how everybody else got their achievement score, but we're really looking at is that student making progress based on their goals and what we would hope to see them grow with. So we ended up really boiling it down to an individual student level for all the students and tracked out all of the growth models based on a number of different factors, and that's what really led to our second logic model that I'll talk about. But these were the things that we started to see bubbling. Like I said, this one had really developed and we already moved forward on it, and now we want to talk about these other two is what we really found, and that's what the logic models we want to present to you tonight, to show what our next steps are.
So in terms of the process, we had said before that we are at that generating solutions phase, which is when you develop the logic models. So, and Matt just talked about the 3 basic logic models that we feel like we needed to develop. So we didn't end up developing a specific logic model for the teacher transition because we felt like we had already started to talk about that. But we have developed one for math and we have developed one for the service delivery models. So the one you're seeing up here is on math. And I'm just going to come over here because it's hard to talk to this from this angle. So basically what we were noticing is that we were seeing persistent achievement gaps on MCAS in math. And that when we went into our universal screening data, we decided we really wanted to look at growth because the overall achievement, again, might not have been the best indicator, but we wanted to see that students were growing compared to their own past performance. And what we discovered is when we kind of looked at those composite measures. So we looked at when we were doing this last year, it was at the time of the winter screening, or the winter screening had just ended. So we looked at that winter screening and looked at what kind of growth that those students had made from the beginning of the year and their scores. And what we discovered when we looked across, and this is a TTU number, by the way, this is not just a Middleton number. We looked across all grade levels, all 3 towns, and roughly 40% of our students with disabilities were having below average growth on their universal screener, and that's not what we want to see. We want to see at least average, in math, yes. We want to see at least average growth, ideally high growth, because average growth would at least keep them on pace with their goals, but high growth would start to close those achievement gaps. So we wanted to think about that in terms of how can we increase the growth of students so that we see better outcomes for those students. So our student learning goal that we were setting here is saying, we would hope that 90% of students with disabilities who are below benchmark and have goals in math will have average to above average growth on the end of year math universal screening composite measures. And the reason why, someone asked us the other day, but why isn't it 100%? Usually SMART goals don't say 100%, first of all, but we feel like 90% is a really ambitious goal. But also some factors are beyond our control. Like, for example, if you had a student who was chronically absent, if they're not here, we can't teach them. But it does have a profound impact on their achievement, right? And so we might not be able to move every student, particularly if there's a variable like that going on. But we felt like if we could set a goal and meet a goal of 90%, that would make a big difference for those students. And so what we discovered as we were really looking at the students with the math goals is that students rarely in the district have a math goal because they have like a specific disability like dyscalculia. What we're noticing is that students are just getting really behind. Like the gaps in their knowledge and where they should be on grade levels is increasing to a point that they then can't access those grade level standards, and then they need that support of an IEP. And so when we were thinking about that, we're like, well, how do we keep those gaps from growing? Like, what would be the solutions that would kind of keep them more on par with their peers? So thinking about those early grades in particular, how do we make sure that they're really getting those strong foundations? And so our math program, Math in Focus, it does have a lot of nice features around really using the mathematical practices, using a lot of manipulatives, like helping kids. It's based on an idea of concrete, pictorial, and abstract, so it kind of brings the kids through, like working with manipulatives first, and then pictures, and then kind of getting to that larger point of understanding algorithms. And so it's very easy in that program, though, if particularly if you're feeling a little rushed for time, that to kind of skip over or not spend as much time in those earlier parts of the program to get to the algorithm. And we were thinking that was potentially causing this for some kids who really need to stay at that concrete issue, like that concrete level a little bit longer, or stay at that pictorial level a little bit longer. So we're doing refresh of training for our K-2 teachers right now to really emphasize that. We have a 4-part series going on where we're using our early release days to do that, where we're reviewing sort of number sense, problem solving, and fact fluency, and we'll have a kind of a tie it all together session at the end. But the goal of this is to really be thinking about what is it that students need in terms of instruction in order to develop those skills in depth, and how does Math in Focus support that, and what parts of Math in Focus do we absolutely want to make sure that we retain if they're having to make some adjustments for other variables. So that's something that's happening right now, that training is in play this fall. Another thing that we wanted to think about is what tools our interventionists have. So when students are getting RTI, what are we doing for them? And something that we learned about from DESE a few years ago is something called, the U.S. Recovery Council has something called the ADMR courses. It's a series of 3 courses, and They are really excellent in the sense that they give diagnostic tools. So if we see that a student has a weakness in a particular area, we can use a diagnostic tool that will really drill down to like exactly where is their understanding breaking down. So it's not like in this broad general category, but like this specific thing they don't understand. They don't understand counting on or some other facet of mathematics. And then we can have very specific strategies that address that particular breakdown in their understanding. And our interventionists are really loving these courses. They've been meeting frequently around this and implementing these strategies within RTI. So it's allowing us to be just a lot more precise in what we're doing in terms of intervention. Another thing that we're thinking about is we do have a variety of digital tools that we use for mathematics, and we ended up really expanding the number of tools we have during the pandemic because everything was free and people were trying lots of different things, but they're maybe not all as effective like as another one might be. So we really want to put a committee together this year and ask ourselves, like, which of these tools have the strongest evidence base, which ones give us the best data on student achievement. So if we're spending part of our day with students on these digital tools, like either as a center in math or maybe during wind block, that they are the best possible tools that we could be putting in front of them to improve their achievement. We're also thinking about additional diagnostic tools that may help us. So when you place a student on a goal for math, you tend to know kind of the broader categories of where they're not doing well, but it doesn't necessarily like help you to understand maybe what's going on with the brains around like their understanding of math. So there are some additional diagnostic tools that we've learned about that we're going to explore to see if that's something that we might want to add to our battery of testing to be able to get a clearer picture of what's going on with those students. Another thing that we are interested in is looking at specialized programs and tools that we have for specialized instruction. So in literacy, there is so much research on reading, and there are so many products and so much training available in literacy. Just the field of math research is like decades behind literacy research. There just isn't as much out there. There aren't as many products, and therefore there isn't as much training. But we were thinking, well, there's probably more than what we're aware of, right? That somewhere, someone has to have identified some things that maybe we don't currently use in this district. So one of our curriculum coordinators ended up doing a really interesting research project last spring to identify some other potential tools that we might want to look at. So we now have like a short list that we want to take a look at and explore whether these might be things that we would want to bring into the Tri-Town to better address those math needs for students. And then ultimately, particularly as we're thinking about like this ABMR work, as we start to have like a better understanding of how we can target certain like misunderstandings that students have around math, how do we make sure that our classroom teachers have access to that? So if they're working with a student in a small group or in WIN, that isn't just having like the interventionist having this knowledge, so that the classroom teachers also have this knowledge about how they could intervene. So this is stuff that we've started, certainly. The training for the gen ed classroom teachers is happening right now. The ABMR is happening right now. We've had all of our interventionists in the Tri-Town have taken at least one of those courses. Some have taken multiple courses, and we will continue to offer those to them. And we're hoping to put that committee together for the digital tools this year, hopefully coming out of this, you wrote some recommendations for next year. And the others are like still in the pipeline that we're looking to move those forward and do some additional work. So that's the logic model of how we're planning to target math and see how we can enhance what we're doing in that area and hopefully not have as many students needing an IEP because we keep those gaps closed for kids. And on to you.
So the second logic model we want to talk about is this notion of the service delivery model. And again, what I mean by service delivery is when a student is identified for an IEP, one of the conversations is the service delivery, and that means what types of service and what is the location of the services that are going to take place, whether it's inclusion in the classroom, pull-out services, and then what categories. So what we found as we looked through this, and it kind of came up in the math poll too, is one of the very clear indicators as we broke down all the growth numbers for all the students was that the students that we identified as having the highest growth, and again, I say this with two pieces of information that have been said. One, these were Tri-Town numbers. We thought it was important to kind of capture all of the students in the Tri-Town. And the second one is this is not the right model for every student. When I say what we see the trends, that's why they're trends. It's not the exact model for every student. They're individualized education plans. And so when I talk about what maybe we could look towards. It doesn't mean that's any preconceived notion around what the service delivery will look like. It's just what we saw in the trending for the growth. So what we saw is a kind of a clear indicator of students who had the most growth was students who had a combination of both in-class exposure to the curriculum and then were pulled out for their specially designed instruction. Okay, so what I mean by that, and it kind of came through in the math, is that tier 1 instruction of the exposure to the general ed curriculum with the concepts in that presentation was a really important indicator of if the student is there for that and then they get specially designed instruction from the special educator, then it's typically referred to kind of in the education world as this double dip, where they're getting both in class and out of class. What we're going to call it, because I think it is a little bit more indicative of what we saw, is just maximum curriculum exposure. So they were there for that, the math and focus, say, or some of the literacy lessons. They were there for that tier 1 instruction, for that exposure to the curriculum, and then they were able to get the specially designed instruction as well. When we saw students who had that model in their day, we were seeing greater growth outcomes. And so that's an important piece of what we really want to have the discussion. Now, the barrier to that, and we need to be really careful, and that's why we have this very specific model of how we're going to try to achieve that, is that, as Scott says all the time, there's a lot of things that we need to look at in terms of time and how we want to achieve that, but the time in the day has not changed. It's never changed, right? So one of the reasons, if anybody has a student, say in middle school, or knows somebody in middle school who has an IEP or needs an academic support block, the conversation at the middle school, because they're very specific blocks, is always, well, when do we fit that in? Where does the academic support? And the default usually is, well, we'll do it during a special. We'll do it during band, or we'll do it during, art or something like that. And the regulations and the law says you need to allow every student access to every curriculum opportunity, including specials in band and all of that, right? So when you sit around a table, and these are some of the conversations that have been going on for years, and it's a hard solution. You sit around the table and you say, okay, if we know this student needs 20 minutes or 30 minutes of specially designed instruction out of the classroom, when are we going to do it that is the most effective time possible and allow for that maximum curriculum exposure, right? And so that is going to be a bulk of this work, to have those conversations. And if you look at this, you can see a lot of the strategies are going to be around master schedules. It's going to be around the win block. Do we pull out during the win block? Do we not pull out during the win block? If we do that, does it allow the student to stay in for that initial tier 1 instruction? It's going to be talking about the service delivery grids. And like I said, it's not one size fit all. So maybe for certain students, that maximum curriculum exposure is 10 minutes in the general ed classroom and then 40 minutes pull out. Or it's 25 minutes in the classroom, right? So there needs to be a real conversation of what is right for each student. Kind of labeled it as Tri-Town culture work around inclusive practices. We have been doing that for years, right? This is an incredibly inclusive district. We have the co-taught model. We have students included all the time. There's been a lot of professional development. Our teachers just do an absolutely amazing job accommodating for students. What this really is we found this very clear data-driven identification of this growth model, and we want to share it. We want to share it with the teachers to really have that conversation of, if we're using a data-driven model, this has to be part of the conversation. And we just haven't done that yet, right? So that's something kind of around the culture, is in staff meetings to say, let's look at this, and this is what's helping these students make the most growth. And then the other piece just down here, this is on here as something I think is a good change. The IEP, the document, the IEP, the state document, has not changed since, I think, the mid-90s. I mean, I started in this in 97. It hasn't changed since then. It has changed this year. It's the first time the actual document has changed. The laws and the regulations have not changed. The document has changed. But one of the changes in that is actually a very nice connection to our conversation. In the old IEP, if a student was pulled, if the recommendation was going to be for a student to be pulled out of a classroom to get their instruction outside of the general ed setting, the question was more centered around explain why you're pulling the student out of the general ed classroom. Okay, so it's already an assumption that you've made the decision that the student's coming out. The new language, although it doesn't really change the philosophy around it, I like the way the new language reads, which is, can the student's educational needs be met in the general ed classroom setting, with or without the use of supplemental aids and services. It just forces the conversation to say, they're in, what can we do to keep them in? And then if we can, whereas the old language kind of like, they're out, why are they out? So it's a nice little change in the language to that, to the new MP. So in general, though, this, again, same goal as with the math, right? 90% of our students with disabilities will meet their benchmark, their growth benchmark. But this logic model is much more about that, how can we do and set up the schedule for the maximum curriculum exposure to see that growth model increase for all of our students.
And that's it.
So I actually think that's it.
Yeah.
I know we know that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
We try to cram it in, but we want to kind of make sure you knew everything we were working on.
It was really informative.
Yes.
It's
Thank
good-
you.
It's good
Yeah,
to see
very
those
good.
those
Yeah, thank you.
benchmarks, and you guys are measuring those benchmarks. It's good.
And the growth, and seeing the, as Peggy said, seeing the tinkering that we've done with training and all the work that our teachers have done at the grade levels, regular ed, special ed, we're seeing those results. And as Peggy said, that K in one group is a pure group, because that's all they've had, right? Like, those are the grades, that's all they've experienced, where our sixth grade kids didn't have that experience in K in one. And so just be able to measure and follow those groups as we go through, I think will be fun, to be frank with you, to see the growth, for sure, so. Yeah, good work.
Thank you.
Can I just say how lucky we are that we have you?
Yeah.
That we have you. And I know Masco now has a new curriculum coordinator, and I only hope that they do for Masco what you have done, and in combination with Matt. This is not a slight to Matt. That took a lot of work, but that information, my mind is like so full right now. But I'm excited to sit down and have conversations that haven't always been as positively framed. I'm excited to sit down at the CPAC table and have discussions about kind of these steps and the data that there is to back them up, and to know the work that you're doing with exactly, it's not that the CPAC said that this is the problem you need to address, but it was a big problem we flagged with the gap, and to see the work that's being done around it. Talking about the individual, the student individual growth, just from a parent perspective, if you can find ways to help quantify that, it is hard when you have a child that doesn't make the progress the same way, and you can't put it on the same growth, the same progress scales and measure it against everybody else. But if you can find a way to quantify that and help parents understand that from the beginning, I think that will be really helpful, because when you can see the growth, it's helpful. You still want them making the growth that everybody else is making. But just to know that you're looking at those numbers, and you'll have those numbers, that you're setting high benchmarks that are at 80 and 90% of kids will reach these things. And then two things. One is that we know, at Masco, you're saying, once they get up there, how those service delivery works. But we also know that the kids that have the gaps, magically, by the time they hit 10th grade, those gaps close. And it's not because... It's because they provide more direct instruction. It's because they will target those skills so that those kids can pass the MCAS. And so you are doing this in a much more meaningful way, because those kids come 10th grade will take it to pass the test, and then what else are they going to do with those skills? They didn't actually learn them. So you're coming at it from such a more thoughtful way, and I hope that it comes out that way. And hopefully then we don't have to worry about all of a sudden that gap is smaller, not closed, but smaller come 10th grade, but these kids actually have the foundation and the knowledge, and they actually learned it. So I'm excited to see where the data goes as they move up through, which I was with the literacy curriculum data as well. And then my only other question is, we had talked about it and we had asked too. There's so much great information here from the team with the professionals. And maybe it's even targeting that last group of kids, is how can you loop parents into this group, into the conversation, to brainstorm on, maybe it's even that last group of kids, what else can be done to help them? You've done such a deep dive from the professional level, but it would be great to get parent input on why else might these kids not be making progress? But I'm so happy. And so tired after listening to them.
Jackie, do you want to get points too? I would love to do a study at the state level. So I've told the story to Peggy and Matt before as well. Like, so when I was a principal, in Andover back in the 2000s, you'd get a raw score in MCAS, right? So let's say it was 40 was the raw score. And then that raw score gets translated to the scaled score. Back then it was, 220, 240, whatever the scale was back in the day. And so you'd see a kid that had a 39, when you got the raw scores, and you'd be like, oh my God, this is when it was advanced, I forget what the categories are now, but that's when it was like advanced, needs improvement, proficient, whatever. And I'd see the 39 and I would go, oh, that child's going to be advanced, right? And I was shocked that the child was proficient. On a 39 out of 40, how the heck was that not advanced? So I remember being very frustrated as a principal and saying, the window that DESE had set, and this goes back a ways, but I'd love to study it now, the window that DESE had set for the third grade kids to be advanced, you basically had to have a perfect score, right? As kids got older, that window widens, right? So then the advanced window by 10th grade was a 25 to a 40. And I always felt it should have been the other way, right? It should be a wider window at the younger grades, and we tighten that window so that by 10th grade, you need almost a perfect score to be advanced. It always seemed very backwards to me, which is why, MCAS is a data point. When we start using our local things that are nationally normed and seeing that growth, to me, I like that we're doing that,
And I think it's helpful timing also with the conversation and the ballot question on MCAS as as a graduation requirement for people just to have a better understanding of if it were to go away, what other data do we have? It doesn't take accountability off the table. That's one way that we can measure it. And for a lot of kids, that actually doesn't provide much of anything as far as student outcomes. It helps guide the teachers with what needs to be covered, but it doesn't actually provide a lot for a lot of kids on actual outcomes. So it just happens to be the one tool that we have for everybody to compare against. So I'm sure you'll hear from us for other things, but this is wonderful information. Thank you.
Yes, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, did you have anything else?
Nope.
No, okay, so we'll just, does anyone want to make a motion to approve the bills and payroll as presented?
I'll make a motion. Present the bills and payrolls as presented.
And I'll second that.
Right, all in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay, we are ready to adjourn. I will make the motion to adjourn the meeting.
I will second that.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays? All right.